Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 o'clock on May the 30th, and it is time for our council meeting to begin. I want to welcome everyone to in attendance this afternoon. In spite of that gorgeous day out there, I'm sure we'd all rather be outside enjoying the sunshine, but we are certainly happy to have you with us this afternoon. All of council is in attendance and our staff is here as well joining us, and we are being filmed and live streamed and filmed by Rogers TV. So we're all set and ready to begin. And we'll call this meeting to order and ask Councillor Kentner to read our land acknowledgement.
Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
Thank you, Councillor Kentner. And I'll ask you all to join us in a moment of reflection as we think about the business ahead of this council. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of interest around the table, pecuniary or otherwise? Noting that if it does become evident, then it can be declared at any time. We'll begin our meeting with announcements, and I'll go around the table if there are any announcements. Councillor Greenfield and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of things. First of all, I want to announce that the Friday Meaford Farmers Market is coming back down at the Rotary Harbor Pavilion from 3 in the afternoon until 7 p.m. This all begins Friday, June 3rd, and that's not very far away. We encourage you to support local and come out and rekindle old friendships, make some new ones down at the farmers market. And also the Friends of the Meaford Library are holding their annual general meeting Thursday, the 9th of June, 4 p.m. at the Friends of the Meaford Library room in the Meaford Public Library. Seems like a very appropriate place for that. Everyone's welcome to attend those meetings. The Friends already early in the season, but they're very busy. The net shed is taking on a great many new books, and anybody who could be interested in helping out with that great cause, they'd be more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everyone. And a couple of announcements from me. This Saturday, June the 4th, our Meaford Rotary Club will be celebrating their 85th anniversary, and that will take place at the Harbor Pavilion. And it will begin at 1 o'clock with a dedication of a new sign for the pavilion in honor of Russ Bumstead, who spearheaded the building of that pavilion back in the early 1990s. There will be some formalities. The Kinsman Club will be operating the bar. Rotary will be doing the barbecue. And at 2:30, our own Board of Education will be playing, and that's a BORED, some retired teachers, and they're pretty great. So I encourage everyone to come out and join Rotary on Saturday and celebrate with us. And also on June the 1st from 4:30 until 6, the Southern Georgian Bay Institute is hosting a Zoom event, which you can register online for at the Southern Georgian Bay Institute website. And it is a discussion amongst local CAOs, our own Rob Armstrong, Sean Everett from TBM, Sonia Skinner from Collingwood, George Vandeboncourt from Wasaga Beach, and John Ferguson from Clearview. And the subject will be local sustainable economies. And I can tell you that will be a very interesting discussion. So I encourage you to partake in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And from me, there's just to announce that from May 29th through to June the 4th, the municipality will be celebrating and marking National Accessibility Week. This is a week dedicated to the celebration and inclusion of people of all abilities. The week's events kicked off just an hour ago or less with Municipal Council and staff gathered to raise the Accessibility Ontarians with Disabilities Act flag at noon today in Market Square. Each night for the remainder of the week, the water tower will be lit up in blue and yellow in recognition of accessibility. There are plenty of other events and activities planned for National Accessibility Week, including chair yoga, a public drop-in chat at the library, and an exhibition at Meaford Museum. So please visit meaford.ca/accessibility for additional information. It's summer, so that means there are a number of construction projects beginning here in the municipality, including on Cook Street, a reconstruction project. There's a number to check for further information. It is municipal511.ca for the latest in information. And that is it for me. If there's anything else of interest to share. Okay, and we'll move on to point 6 on our agenda, which is public participation. This is always a time when we welcome the public to present to council, to come in and be engaged, involved in the council meeting itself through presentation of points of interest for them, for a deputation on an agenda item, or for a question that they would like an answer to. Tonight, this afternoon, we have 3 presentations, and we will begin with Beth Aubrey from Big Brothers and Big Sisters and Community Bursary Program update for them. And they are coming to us virtually. Yes, they are.
Thank you so much for welcoming me.
Welcome, Beth. Please go ahead.
Lovely. Yeah, I just wanted to first of all thank the Municipality of Meaford and Meaford City Council for having me speak today. I'm just going to start with a brief introduction about myself and our history, and then I'm going to just jump right into the support that we received from the Community Bursary Program. So again, my name is Beth Aubrey. I'm the Executive Director with Big Brothers Big Sisters Grey Bruce, and I've been with the organization just since late in 2021. I feel so lucky to be a part of the organization as someone who grew up in this community and recently moved back, and certainly excited to provide any support I can to Big Brothers Big Sisters. So we've been in the community for 60 years, and we've served youth, children, and families all across Grey and Bruce. Just in 2016, we expanded from Owen Sound to support surrounding areas. So the Community Bursary Program was really important to us because, as some people might know, receiving funding for multiple years is quite difficult, and having that sort of relied upon support is very rare in nonprofit. So we were so grateful to receive that funding. We are a small organization, and so this was particularly important to us. We really wanted to make sure the funding was invested specifically within the Meaford community, even though we serve, all across Grey and Bruce, but we wanted to make sure that those dollars were invested directly back into the community. So we do have community-based and in-school programs, and the original application was for in-school programs. We were able to allocate some of that funding towards our in-school programs, but it became a little bit more difficult in 2020 and 21. As we know, with COVID, a lot of schools weren't able to welcome sort of extra curricular or educational opportunities outside of just core competency and classes. So what we did was we have now 12 active supported volunteers in Meaford since receiving that funding, and 10 youth that are supported through that funding as well, and that will absolutely be ongoing. Some of the statistical outcomes from that, We know that $1 invested is about $18 back into the community, and that's certainly what we've seen through this funding. The children that are involved with the funding, we see that, our big outcomes is expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibilities. And this is also shown to improve sort of executive function and self-regulation. This is something that is often really taken for granted, but a lot of youth just don't have someone in their life, someone that's a reliable person, a support person that can provide that kind of support. We all know that parents, families, guardians have been, under a lot of extra pressure and stress these last couple of years. So mentorship, we've seen, our need only continue and grow. We've also seen about an 80% improvement in one or more of the following areas due to this funding. So we look at decision-making, goal-directed behavior, relationship skills, self-awareness, personal responsibility, and optimistic thinking. That last one proved to be extremely important over the last couple of years, that optimistic thinking. And the funding really went to youth who we felt really needed it the most. Certainly we have a very long wait list, but like I said, we wanted to make sure those youth in Meaford were matched, were supported. Some of those outcomes that I just sort of mentioned, a big part of that is social inclusion, civil engagement, and physical and emotional wellness. That civil engagement piece being, again, really important for us. A lot of youth we're finding are, growing up in this community, similar to myself, going away to school, but we're really trying to bring young people back to the area. And that civil engagement piece is really important. A lot of the screening and support that we provide to the volunteers in our program, ongoing education, professional development, that's really about making sure that they have the skills to support youth when it's needed, and when it's out of their range or ability, that they can refer back to us as an agency, and we can, either support someone in-house, or if it's needed, make that referral to another organization. So civil engagement is really about empowering young people to be involved in, local municipalities, local politics, local charities, local initiatives. It's about giving back to the community, and we expect to see that in the years to come with the funding that was given from Meaford. And then just a little snapshot of our plans going forward. We really are expanding. So just 3 years ago when we received this funding, like I said, it was really important that it was annual funding. We've been able to grow our support, not just in Meaford, but in communities all across Grey and Bruce, and now we're serving almost 100 youth. That's coming from just a very, very small organization. We have just a very few number of staff, and also the organization has been without an executive director for quite a number of years. So this support has really helped not only bolster our services, like I said, within Meaford, but also just make sure that, we do have some of those funds to really make sure that we have the staffing that we need, because we certainly still have a very long wait list of about 50 youth. That has, shrunk just a little. We've been able to support about 8 more of those matches within the last couple months, but we're really excited to be welcoming another staff member as well very shortly. So we will have 2 mentorship coordinators, and we hope that that can continue to support, like I said, not only all of Grey and Bruce, but specifically within the Meaford community, because we are finding we are still receiving support requests within the area. And we're looking to hopefully expand this year into, the Collingwood area, but making sure that at the same time, we're really prioritizing it and focusing on the communities that we're already serving. And that will be the addition of that extra staff. So again, I just wanted to really thank the municipality of Meaford, the entire Meaford City Council, for the work that you do, for the support that you do, for investing in local organizations and youth organizations. It really makes the work that we do possible. So I want to give a big thanks on behalf of myself as the executive director, but also on behalf of our staff and our entire board of directors. A true thank you for all the support. And then I'm happy to open it up to any questions or feedback.
Thank you, Beth. That was a very comprehensive report, and we certainly appreciate it, particularly with the emphasis on Meaford. Did I understand there were 10 little brothers or sisters in Meaford that you work with?
That's correct. We have 10 active littles, we call them, in the Meaford community.
And is there a waiting list?
Within Meaford, we have 2 youth right now that aren't matched. We do have 12 volunteers, but 2 of those young people are specifically looking for a male, actually, and we don't have any more male volunteers in the area. It's always a little bit more difficult to recruit males. So that's something that we hope, over the next year, we can do some targeted advertising in the area. And again, with the support of another staff member, really be able to match those kids, hopefully within the next couple months.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Well, we thank you very much for what you do. I can well imagine the relief to parents who, when their little is matched, and what a blessing it is for that young person as well. So we really appreciate and value your services. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.
You as well. Take care.
And next on our list, we will welcome Marg Scheben-Edey with a report on affordable housing in Grey Bruce. So happy to have you join us today.
Thank you. So is somebody controlling the slides?
Yes, in the back. Yes.
Yep, we're good. All right. I'm not a techie, so I'm not sure how this adjusts. Sorry.
That's all right. Do you need a
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Mayor Klumpus and Deputy Mayor Keaveney and Council for allowing me to come and speak with you today. It's not news to anyone that we have a housing crisis on our hands. We've become almost blind to the word home, and instead we've become addicted to property speculation and growing real estate wealth. Housing is a competitive sport where only those with the highest incomes or assets win, but that's simply not good news for our communities and our future sustainability. Next slide, please. Last year, a group of housing advocates, politicians, and other parties that were interested in the topic decided we wanted to look at the housing issue in South Georgian Bay as a region in greater detail. We spent 8 months researching, learning, and gathering ideas from all sectors. Our purpose now is to share that learning with you and to spark action in our region that can see us all working together and sharing a common understanding of this complex issue. Next slide, please. Since single-family zoning came to Canada around 1920, the world has changed. We have less than half the number of people living in each house than we did then. Land was cheap and plentiful. In 1941, there were 2.2 million households in Canada, and today there are over 14 million. A few decades ago, things like real estate investment trusts, short-term rentals, condominiums, and house flipping were unknown. Housing has changed from being a home to being a commodity as the wealth gap and inequities are continuing to grow. We simply can no longer absorb the population growth and demographic changes unless we unblock densification and start working collectively to change the world as the world has changed. Next slide, please. We know that this issue is scary and complex. When people don't have affordable housing, regardless of their income level, they don't have enough dollars left at the end of each month to eat well. There's not enough money or disposable dollars to shop local. We can't maintain or grow our labor force. We start to lose our businesses. And as you know, all of this is already happening. This really is a problem for everyone in the community and not just those who lack adequate housing. It affects all of us. We also know that housing is quite likely the #1 issue in the provincial election this week, and it will be in the municipal elections this fall. The good news is that you as a municipal council have a significant role to play and can be part of the solution. Next slide, please. A healthy community includes many forms of housing and tenures that meet the needs of residents who may move around within this continuum throughout their lives. Despite this, for many years, the focus has been almost exclusively been on market rate housing, and in particular, ownership versus purpose-built rentals. Next slide, please. The first thing we need to do is understand the term affordable housing. Affordable means spending no more than 30% of gross median household income on shelter costs, including things like rent and mortgage payments, taxes, and utilities, period. It doesn't matter if you make $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year. Affordable housing does not refer only to social housing. It refers to housing that's affordable for every portion of society. Next slide, please. In your agenda, you'll see a full copy of our report. Here's a little snapshot. Shows that there's all kinds of data included from the South Georgian Bay region. And of course, it will soon be updated with the 2021 census data. Understanding our local reality is where we start, but then what? Next slide, please. According to the 2016 census, over 5,500 households in South Georgian Bay were in core housing need, meaning households that are living in unaffordable, inadequate, or unsuitable housing. This was in 2016 when the median price of a home was less than half of what it costs today in South Georgian Bay. So what might that number of houses in core need be today with what's happened in the market? We also know that 4 times as many renter households are in core housing need compared to homeowners. And this is a really important point. Renters' median gross household incomes are on average only 50% of homeowner families. So in 2016, this just gives you an example up there, looking at 3 communities with Sake Beach, Collingwood, and Meaford. Median gross household income before taxes was roughly $62,600, but that doesn't really reflect the true affordability gap. Owners, for example, averaged incomes of $76,500, whereas renters, it was $39,700. The greatest and most pressing need today is for affordable rental housing if we want to have sustainable local economies. Based on these numbers above, a middle income renter family should not be spending more than $995 a month on shelter costs. And today, that's simply impossible in our area without intervention and significant changes in policies. Next slide, please. One of the first things to look at is the rate at which we're losing housing stock. A study done in Ottawa showed that they were losing 15 affordable housing units for every one created. If we look at South Georgian Bay, we've lost untold numbers of affordable housing units to gentrification, vacancy decontrol, short-term rental accommodation, property sales and demolitions. Rooming houses have been converted to boutique hotels. Tenants have been displaced as homes have been sold. We've seen demolition of affordable units in favor of upscaler supersized home. While this has been happening, how many affordable units have been created? In our region, I would suggest the ratio of units lost to those created is certainly greater than 15-1. So it starts with preserving the units we have. While it won't solve the whole problem, municipalities do have tools at their disposal, such as looking at short-term rental laws, looking at rental replacement bylaws, and others to help tackle the challenge. Next slide, please. Most government initiatives have been focused on increasing housing supply. However, adding to the supply without attaching affordability metrics doesn't help to solve the problem. Secondly, municipalities often defer to the county to address this issue. Outside of overarching land use planning, the county has a role as the provincially appointed service manager to address social housing. While this is critically important, it doesn't speak to complete communities and housing for all. Municipalities can and must play a critical role in ensuring the right supply is built. Next slide, please. Municipalities can work with all stakeholders, such as other levels of government, developers, philanthropists, the business community, and not-for-profit entities to find innovative solutions. For example, the town can encourage and seed the formation of not-for-profits that work to remove land from the speculative market and preserve them for the creation of affordable housing in future. Next slide, please. Secondly, we need to look at the other tools municipalities have available. Of course, it starts with official plans, which are currently under review, and then implementing appropriate zoning bylaws. Something to think about. What percentage of the residential lands in Meaford are zoned for single-family housing? There's a global trend towards eliminating this classification as we require density and supply to accommodate a growing population with smaller average household sizes. Are there shovel-ready lands available for affordable housing to help reduce planning timeframes for new proposals? Planning ahead may also allow greater access to financial opportunities through other levels of government for the creation of affordable housing. Next slide, please. Towns can incentivize new unit creation through things such as community improvement plans, municipal capital facilities bylaws, and the inclusion of affordable housing and development charges and our community benefit charges, which is a financial contribution that's paid to the municipality when land is being developed. As I said at the outset, it's a complex issue, and by taking the time to listen, learn, and by reading that full report we've provided, you can help in bringing the community closer to solving the problem. And yes, the report does include a sample toolkit of things that municipalities can do. Next slide, please. We recommend that municipalities see the need for affordable housing as a critical priority in strategic planning and today. For this reason, we envision that each municipality in the region have a dedicated affordable housing committee and ideally appoint a staff person to help create and monitor an affordable housing master plan. Collecting, analyzing, and using data to identify community needs aids in good decision-making and allows for adjustments in the years ahead. It also gives an opportunity for councils to look at best practices and options that fit the local needs. We envision that if each community in South Georgian Bay had such a committee, there could then be a regional committee where members from each of the surrounding towns meet to collectively share ideas, best practices, and look for opportunities to work together. We hope that you will agree the time to act is urgent. After all, if not now, when? Thank you again, Mayor Klumpus and members of council for letting me present to you today.
Well, we appreciate the effort that you've been taking in this regard, Marg, and thank you very much for your comprehensive report. I'll open it up for questions. Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And Marg, what a pleasure. It's the first time that you and I have seen each other in person. So thank you for being here. Hello. And I want to just share how much on behalf of our municipality, we appreciate all of the important work that you have been undertaking, all of your accomplishments and the imperative work that you were still involved in. And I very much agree. Working together, we can solve this problem. I have firsthand experience, certainly, in seeing the impacts of the lack of affordable housing here from the business that I operated for 43 years, where staff just couldn't stay here because they could not find a place they could afford to live. And that was hard. I understand now that even prospective new OPP officers are being asked if they have a place to live before they are hired here because they may not be able to find one they could afford. If we're going to help our businesses to find the staff that we need, we have to move forward and find a way to bring more affordable accommodations to Meaford. And you speak to the rentals that we need and the price point that people can afford to pay. And that's really valuable information, and not just for our workforce, but for our seniors and for folks on fixed incomes and everyone who needs the housing, as we speak about housing for all. And I know that we will be focused in that as this council moves forward and into the next new council that we will inaugurate this coming fall. But two things I did want to share, Marg, before I turn the mic over. Two bits of what I hope you will see as good news. There was discussion at Grey County Council this past Thursday about delegations to go to AMO. And one thought that came forward, and I believe CAO Wingrove agreed that that would be a good idea. And I think our mayor agreed as well, to request a delegation with Minister Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, to discuss tools for both the county and lower tiers, whereby we would have more teeth to enforce the province's mandate of 20% of housing being affordable. Right now, we don't have the ability to enforce that. So that discussion is underway. And the other thing I wanted you to know is that I will be bringing forward a notice of motion later in this meeting to begin the process of creating a terms of reference. Moving forward, we know that it is late in this term, but just getting that process started, Mark. So I hope that leaves you with a positive note from your trip here to Meaford today.
It does. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
My pleasure.
Are there any other questions with Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Marg. You mentioned in your presentation that basically $1,000 a month for shelter costs would be reasonable. Can you give us a ballpark figure of what the average cost is in 2022? I'm guessing 1,700 or 1,800. Am I low? I doubt if I'm high.
I would say you're probably guessing correctly on that, depending on the size of the unit. So we tracked rental rates. Those are a few months old now. And in Meaford, they were right in between that $1,700 and $1,800 on average, with larger units being higher than that.
Thank you.
I'm not saying, okay, Councillor Kentner. Please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Your Worship, and through you, Margaret. I'm curious, you're centered in Collingwood, which has been the hotbed of development. And has there been any change? Like what we're finding is that developers are wanting to build high-end condos that will bring more people in, but will not meet the needs of the people already here, and will not meet the needs of the people, those people who move to Meaford and want to be served in so many different ways will get service. Are you doing anything in Collingwood concrete that would be any kind of a model for us in terms of getting developers to bring to planning meetings something we're interested in?
That kind of work is underway in Collingwood. The town a year ago established an affordable housing task force, which made over 50 recommendations to council, many of which tackle issues like that. The intention is to take that now to the next step, which will be engaging with developers, builders, landowners, in what the options are. And it's very difficult for developers to build at an affordable rate. It takes working together with other entities and other levels of government to be able to achieve that. So for a developer, it certainly is much easier to build, meet a demand that is there for higher end units, get your profits and be gone. So it takes a real change in thinking and a change in structure in order to change that outcome. So work is underway in both, I believe, Town of Blue Mountains and Collingwood. And we're really hoping that we can start doing that as a region together.
And could I just one more?
Please go ahead.
I was told last week that Meaford needs to get a housing authority in place. And that information came from somebody who is very knowledgeable about TC Energy and their plans here. So is this the type of committee you're talking about, a housing authority, or is that something different?
That would be something different. So a housing authority, that could be a municipal service board, it could be a not-for-profit entity, it can take a lot of different forms. So I don't really know what that person would be suggesting is the form that they want. But it starts first with having a committee that can identify statistical needs so that you know what direction you have to go in, And then the municipality has a role to play in seating something like that, but has to balance it against liability. And so at that point, it's very important to involve knowledgeable people, whether that be a consultant or a lawyer or people that have been working in this industry for a long time, as to what the benefits are for the municipality. You have to know first where you're going before you decide what the structure is to get there.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. I'll thank you again for joining us here today and for the work that you do. Appreciate
you.
it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next report is from Sanya Malik from KPMG regarding our service delivery review. Welcome.
Welcome, Your Worship. My name is Bruce Peaver. I'm the partner on the engagement with the town of Meaford, Municipality of Meaford, and it's a pleasure to be here today to say a few introductory remarks before we turn it over to Sana to walk you through the report. So going back to just after Christmas this year, we were engaged by the municipality to undertake a service delivery review. And the idea was to identify how the municipality is delivering services and how we could improve the delivery of those services and what would be the resources that were required. And so over the course of the last 4 months, we've been working with your staff to principally map out all the different processes. So we looked at over 75 key processes the municipality has, and we mapped them out with your staff and documented them, and then identified areas of opportunity. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Sana, and she's going to walk you through the 5 key opportunities, or the top 5 opportunities in our report for the municipality. Sana?
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm Sana Malik, and as Bruce pointed out, I'm just going to walk you through our different phases of the project, and then we'll get into what the key opportunities are. So if you go to page 3 of the presentation, those are the slides. That's the slide that talks about the different phases. So we started this project, if you go to page 3, the following page, slide. There we go. So we started this project in December, January, where we kicked off the engagement with the project team. We moved on to the current state analysis, where we conducted stakeholder engagement. And we also ran an organizational survey to get feedback from everybody involved in the different processes. We moved on to the process mapping, like Bruce mentioned. We did quite a few process mapping sessions with the teams. We mapped them out, validated it with the team as well. And then we moved on to the opportunity identification and recommendation phase in April. And finally, we're bringing the final report for council. Go to the next slide. As part of this work, KPMG performed stakeholder engagement, process mapping, and developed service profiles for all departments. In collaboration with municipal staff, we identified top 5 opportunities, operations, and improved service delivery. Each opportunity was supported by an assessment rationale, including financial impact, citizen impact, underlying risks, and alignment with council priorities. Finally, we developed a high-level implementation plan to support the recommendations. The implementation plan highlights the governance, change management, and communication strategy required for successful execution of key initiatives. We also looked at what are the key considerations for the municipality. So the first one was, is the municipality ready? Overall, the municipality has initiated steps to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of services through automation, digitization, and process improvement. And we believe that the work completed as part of this review will serve as a foundation to guide the municipality towards a culture of continuous improvement. The next consideration is who will lead this transformation. The adoption of new ways to doing things will require governance and oversight. The municipality will have to determine the key personnel and stakeholders to be involved in the process and leading the change. And the last consideration, and perhaps the most important, is the transformation appropriately funded and resourced. From our work and engagement with stakeholders, it is apparent that the municipality has an ambitious and forward-thinking agenda. We found the municipality is committed to excellence in service delivery and improving customer service. Nonetheless, the municipality will need to review its resourcing model to achieve its ambitious agenda. It will need additional resourcing. If you move to the next slide, we'll walk you through the 5 opportunities that we identified, the top 5. If you look at the final report, there are quite a few others as well. One of the first top opportunities is to implement an end-to-end HRIS solution, so human resources information solution. And we believe that the implementation of an end-to-end HRIS solution will enhance workforce satisfaction and manage workforce needs. Some of the key areas of digitization that we identified was electronic online timekeeping and scheduling across the municipality, performance management to document goals and performance evaluations, learning management of training records in more consistent methods, records management of personnel data, and lastly, employee self-service functions to update personnel information, retrieve information, and specific requests. If you go to the next slide. The next opportunity was to develop an IT business plan. We noted that there is an opportunity for the municipality to mature its technology capabilities by developing an IT business plan. The plan will assist the municipality in setting an approach for IT decision-making and service priorities in a cohesive manner. And the plan will also inform the organizational structure, resourcing levels, and prioritize action items, as well as key performance targets. If you go to the next slide. The third priority was the coordination of asset management between departments. There is an opportunity to coordinate asset management responsibilities between various departments to improve asset management program and maintenance of asset management data. Specifically, what this opportunity means is to implement a work order management system to manage and track all operational and maintenance work by asset. It also means recording your building condition assessments in the asset management system, which are currently being manually maintained. And also to develop a strategic funding approach to the municipality's asset management program to address new development and aging infrastructure needs, and to clarify how capital projects are prioritized. And lastly, it includes improving cross-departmental collaboration and information sharing, and also to clarify who is responsible for updates to the system. You go to the next slide. Our fourth opportunity was to develop an implementation plan to replace Keystone. So during our stakeholder engagement, as well as the process mapping sessions, it was evident that Keystone, the municipality's accounting and finance software, is no longer agile enough to support operational needs. So as service areas are looking to modernize their processes, there's an opportunity to develop an implementation plan to replace Keystone and modernize the municipality's financial processes. Some of the functionalities that financial services would like to explore include electronic billing capabilities, digital property records and property customer portal, more efficient and stronger financial reporting features, etc. If you go to the last slide. Our last slide is the last opportunity, top 5 opportunity, which is to perform an in-depth review of planning services. And this opportunity includes an in-depth review of planning services to clearly define key processes and steps to develop standard operating procedures, to analyze and assess the impact of new provincial legislative requirements on resourcing and service levels, to reevaluate the current resourcing model to execute changes to improve the processing of development applications, to digitize the application review and approval processes to manage review timelines, track application status, streamline communication and documentation retention, and also to improve public education of application procedures to facilitate submission of complete application and minimize resubmissions. And lastly, to review the fee structure to process planning and development applications. I believe that was the last slide and the end of our presentation today. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sana. I'll open it up to council for questions on this. Councillor Kentner.
Well, through your worship, thank you very much for your presentation. And I'll just start the ball rolling. I just want to say that you've heard of the good and the bad news, and this is the bad news and the worst news, because we are really behind the 8 ball in a big way. And so many of these things are high risk and low citizen, impact. So it's tough to do. And the only thing that I can contribute to this is that I think this is endemic throughout the private sector as well as the public sector. I think this is everybody's problem, and it's not funny, and it's going to cost money. But I think that I'm glad that you find that we are anxious to move forward and to be more customer service oriented, and that's the direction to go. And I just look forward to some discussion about how we do move forward.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship, and I appreciate the presentation. And I will say that I found some of the comments from staff concerning the mention of feeling a divide between, employers and managers and employees, and people not being sure about their roles and responsibilities, and issues of trust and lack of communication and this kind of thing. It's hard to hear those things, but at least now we're aware of them. And I'm hoping through this process that we can continue, as you refer to continuous improvement, that we can find ways of addressing those concerns and making things better. You speak often to communication, and we do have our new communication strategy. So I wonder, first of all, if you can speak to any links between the two that could be beneficial to improving our current situation. And also you speak to additional resources. My assumption is that you would be referencing the need to hire additional staff. And if so, in what department, what those roles might be, and how hiring additional staff might help to solve some of the issues that we're facing.
Sure, certainly, I can maybe start, and maybe if I'll defer to management. As we were doing the review, there were specific departments, for example, planning, which certainly stood out for us, where more resources are required. But as we did the process mapping, there were lots of efficiencies were identified. So before staff recruit additional people, I think there's an opportunity to sort of in-house look at the processes where efficiencies can be done, and then determine if and where additional staff is required. But certainly to lead some of these engagements, even to review the process maps, there's an additional support that would be required. I would leave it to the CEO and his team to decide where exactly that person or personnel would be and what their titles would be. In terms of the communication, certainly there was a gap, like you mentioned, in the server responses. And what we did was as part of our final report, we presented a communication strategy that how important it is for our review to be communicated to staff, and all future key initiatives to be also communicated to staff ongoing basis, so that they don't feel that divide anymore. But maybe Rob, if you want to comment.
Yeah, through your worship. So the presentation by KPMG is their findings. A lot of discussion, great engagement throughout the entire organization. It just wasn't what the leadership or the management team said, as we went right down and talked to everyone. So this is a bit of a suggestion to us. The follow-up is we'll bring a report back on just some immediate actions, but also as budget time. One of the things I believe that we've failed a bit is in implementation, certain programs we haven't considered those resources needed to properly implement various programs. So this is a highlight that we need to be a little more thorough in those considerations as we bring back a program. It's not just buying that software, throwing it out and letting it run. There is the resources required to get it running properly. And that will be our consideration going forward as we build the early budgets, and this setting the roadmap for that. But for council's consideration at budget time, obviously.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Your last I guess I found it very interesting, and that is to review the fee structure to process planning and development applications. I was just wondering if KPMG, maybe in some other studies that you folks have conducted, do you have any indication that our fee structures are perhaps not as adequate as what they could be in today's world of rampant development in our area? Can you help me out on that?
Sure, I can certainly try. So basically, that recommendation was, we understand that the fee structure is looked at. What we're recommending there is to do a comparative analysis or deeper dive into where you really stand to address the question you just raised. How are other municipalities comparing to Meaford, and if there's an opportunity to perhaps increase or adjust those rates accordingly.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'm not seeing any further questions, Sana, so thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank
There'll
you.
be more to come on this, I'm sure. Thank you. We have no deputations that I'm aware of, and no public questions to come either. So with that, we'll move into council inquiries. Anything from council this afternoon, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and one inquiry for Jessica, if I may. We've talked about this many times before. We know that the increased level of traffic and speeding is a major issue in our urban area in particular. And we've discussed Miller Street at prior meetings, and I know that the signage has gone up. But from what I'm hearing from residents in that area, it doesn't seem to be making a big difference. So I'm wondering about the potential of moving the electronic speed sign from St. Vincent Street over to Miller for a period of time to see if that would make a difference. I know that on Ridge Road, having the sign there has had an impact and is slowing traffic down. So I just wondered if you thought that was a potential, Jessica.
Through you, Madam Chair, great question. So I want to say it was a year ago now. It feels like a year is really short, but we had a report that came to council and approved the purchase of additional speed signs that we have purchased. Excuse me, specifically for Miller Street. They're the same as the ones that are on Ridge Road. Given the delay in getting anything on a timely fashion, we have finally received them. And now we're just working with Enbridge to make sure they go in the right place, because there is a high pressure gas main that runs down the one side of the road. So they should be installed in the very near future. There'll be one at the top of the hill and one at the bottom of the hill. Yeah, we're just waiting for a little bit of feedback from our friends at Enbridge, and then we should be off to the races.
That's good news, Jessica. Thank you.
Any further questions for our staff? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to point 8 on our agenda, motions and bylaws for decision. The first one is our consent agenda. We have seen these items come before us and can, if all are in favor, move them all in a block as a consent agenda. So there are 3 items to be considered under this, CAO 2022-23, to approve the award of tender INF ES 2022-04 roof replacements at various municipal buildings to LaFleche Roofing Limited for $268,748.16. The second item, CAO 2022-24, is to approve the award of tender INF ES 2022-05 haulage of biosolids to Region of Huronia Environmental Services for $184,409.47. And the third item is Bylaw 2022-34, is a bylaw to authorize the execution of a memorandum of understanding with 2663461 Ontario Inc. with regard to temporary use of a portion of 22 Trowbridge Street East for private parking. And that be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Are there any of those three that council wishes to pull? Seeing none, I'll have a mover and a seconder, please, to put them on the table. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner, and to call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to items for consideration. The first one is the addendum to COM 2022-15, a drainage petition for 599236 Second Concession North. I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Vickers. Thank you. Excuse me. The recommendation is to accept the petition for drainage signed by Henry Mitchell, submitted under the authority of Section 4 of the Drainage Act, and to send a notification of this decision to the petitioners, the Grace Dauble Conservation Authority, Ministry of Natural Resources, and Forestry, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and to appoint R.J. Burnside and Associates as the engineer under Section 8 of the Drainage Act, and to also include the preparation of a preliminary report under Section 10 of the Act. Are there any comments, questions? Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So on this one, first of all, I want to thank you, Jessica, for meeting with the folks that were involved, the local landowners, the representative from OMAFRA, and the expert on the Tile Drainage Act. All I can say is that this afternoon, our report's fairly clear that after that good engagement that you had, nothing could really be resolved just standing and talking. And so really this afternoon, we are where we were 2 weeks ago, Madam Mayor. We're looking to move forward on an action that this report recommends. And I just want to say thank you, Jessica, for trying and meeting. That's what you could do, and you tried. So thank you.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just staff, can I confirm that there will be no cost to the municipality for this? It will be borne by the residents?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. So the petitioner or the person who submitted the petition bears the costs associated, including the design component of it, which is what we're moving forward on now. So it is all towards the petitioner.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on this? No further questions, then I will call the question. All in favor of the recommendation as presented, and that is carried. Thank you. Okay. The second one is FIN 2022-07, the tax rates and ratios. Sorry. And a bylaw, the corresponding bylaw 2022-35, the adoption of 2022 tax rates. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Bartley, thank you. And the recommendation is be it resolved that bylaw 2022-35 is a bylaw to provide for the adoption of the 2022 tax rates, establish the due dates, and to further provide for penalty and interest in default of payment thereof for 2022. And that be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Any questions or comments? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the tax season 2021 budget time, we come up with a rate for residential taxes, a mill rate. The county changed the formula for commercial versus residential, so it did end up putting the residential mill rate higher for 2021. And there's nothing we could do about that. I understand that. Now for this year, we agreed upon a tax increase of just under 5% and amalgamated with the two, the county and the education, it was going to look like it was going to be just under 4% total. Now we're quite a bit higher than that. We're a full percentage higher than we agreed upon at budget time. And I understand it's got something to do with MPAC's new assessments. Is this correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Bartley, not exactly. So in the report, it's got average assessment per year. But if you were just to look at the tax rates over tax rate, your increase is 4.89% for our local levy. And our blended rate is 3.78. If you're just looking at assessment, so if my $100,000 assessment's 100,000 this year and 100,000 last year, our increase is only 3.78 overall.
But it's going to end up higher than that. The municipality will get more than that in the end.
No, because when we calculate tax rates, it's like a weighted average. So you can't go individual assessment to individual assessment. It's a weighted average. So you have to take that weighted average and calculate your tax rate. Does that explain it for you?
Well, it does. I was just working out the formula and it looks like overall the new taxes brought in will be over 5%.
But that's based on that average assessment, not on assessment over. So a tax rate over tax rate, it's the 3.78% as a blended tax rate. If you, not everybody's assessment's going to go up by that average assessment increase. So some people's will actually go down, but you have to realize too, we're in still frozen because we haven't got our reassessments for the 4-year period. So I don't think that what you're asking isn't going to happen. I don't believe.
Okay, the way I had it worked out, the municipality was at the end of the year was going to come up with about 1% more in the bank.
No.
No.
I can only tax based on the assessed values that I have, and our tax rates calculated on our assessed values.
And so let's say Impact put the assessments up 20% across the board for residential. Would we adjust our mill rate down to break even on that?
We would have to base it on what our current assessments are that current year, and we'd have to look at it at that time.
Okay, I look forward to seeing if it works out. Because if there was new money for the municipality, I was either wanting to change the mill rate at this time or put it towards some of the extra enhancements that we did that's going to cost for the 2023 budget about 100 grand. So
you would have to look at growth for that,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So that's where we find new money.
Okay, we'll see how it works out then. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Val, because really everybody's assessment hasn't changed since 2016. So in a way, it should be fairly clean for the average person. It's only if somebody has made an addition to their building or built a new house. They're the only assessment that changes, does it not, Val?
Through you, Councillor, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yes, only if they have a new building permit or they've got a supplemental tax bill would their assessment change this year generally. But that doesn't mean your average assessment overall isn't going to change, right? Because they take all of the numbers and your average could be a little higher.
Through you, it won't be very much, so it'd be a very
No.
small amount.
Like this was $2,000 average assessment increase.
Okay. Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions through you to Valerie, if I may. Valerie, on the tax rates, the farmlands property class is now 0.218, and at one time, for a long time, was 0.25, but we have dropped that down. So my first question is is that comparable to other municipalities in Grey County or Grey Bruce? Are we keeping with the flow on that number?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Greenfield. The ratios that are produced in the bylaw are from the county. All of Grey County has to use the same ratios.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And if I
Go ahead,
may,
please.
I'm looking at the different classes. Where does short-term accommodations, where does that fit in on that list? What would it be? What would it be under, or do we have a separate class for STAs?
Through your worship, that will be a residential unit. That's what they are considered.
Yeah, just straight residential.
Correct.
In the sense that you're thinking of, Councillor Greenfield, would be residential. I think we have to be careful when we use the phrase short-term accommodation, because that can mean hotels as well, and hotels would be commercial. If you're thinking of like residential properties being rented out under platforms like Airbnb, that would be residential.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? All right, I'm seeing none, so I will call the question. All in favor of this recommendation moving forward as is, and that is carried. Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to move into Committee of the Whole. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Vickers, thank you. At 2:06. All in favor, moving into Committee of the Whole. Thank you. The first one is CAO 2022-26, Structure 002, an RFP award. I have a mover and a seconder to put this on the table, please. Councillor Vickers, Councillor Bartley, thank you. Okay, and the recommendation is the Committee of the Whole recommend Council approve the 2023 expenditure of $58,102 to fund the professional services costs associated with the replacement of Structure 002. And 2, to approve the award RFP INFTS 2022-03, provision of engineering services for the same structure for the replacement to RJ Burnside and Associates at a cost of $172,701.87. And to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the agreement. Any comments, questions on this? Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question is, will the Burnside's firm be bringing us back options for type of bridge that might be reconstructed, or have we got that far yet?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
We have asked for that type of assessment to be done as part of the detailed design, and that is what we're moving on with here through this report. So we don't have it yet, but we have asked for them to look at alternatives to built as is or replacement like for like.
Okay. And then go ahead.
Yeah. Oh,
Second.
okay, thanks, Your Worship. And this came up, of course, at budget time, and I was pretty blown away by this at that discussion. Almost $175,000 just for the engineer's report. And then I think I'm reading in the report, we might be looking at $1.8 million to replace the bridge. Under the circumstances, I'm really having troubles with this one. I think it might be the worst, and that's not likely the right word, but it may be the most difficult bridge replacement cost-wise, if you compare it to the traffic count and the number of people this bridge serves, it may be the worst that we have in our municipality, but I certainly hope that's the case. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So my comments are going to follow a little bit along the line of Councillor Greenfield. I hope my fellow council members have had an opportunity to go out there and have eyes on this structure. Most of council have been out to the historic Leith Church, so you know where that is. So it's just up the road a little ways heading out of Leith and be on your right-hand side. And if you don't look too quickly, you might miss it. It just looks like a little laneway. So I went out and had a look at it, and our report's pretty accurate. 14 feet across between the guide rails and 30 feet long. I took the opportunity to just take a tape roll out of my truck and drop it from the bridge deck and touch the water. It was 11 feet. And like Councillor Greenfield, you know, just getting across that span for this kind of money that's being talked about, I also wanted to have clarity on page 261 of our report, which says the project will consist of detailed engineering for Bridge 2, including bridge construction alternatives. So when I was thinking about alternatives, if you go up to the next side road, which is side road 21, 21 takes you into Owen Sound, 28th Avenue. If you're on 28th Avenue, that's where Owen Sound has their, where you can buy fill and stuff like that, and where they recycle items. So getting across on 21, it's 2-lane, but if you stop and you look, they have a culvert that services that. And so I'm very glad for some clarity on construction alternatives getting across. If you do take the time to have a look at that bridge, yes, built back in the year that it said it was, you can see the spalling of the concrete. You can see the materials that the early folks used between frost, water, ice. You can see the footings are compromised. So I too would want to see the expenditure that this council would be looking at to be much reduced. And I do look forward to engineering coming up with alternatives to how to get across this little span. And I don't think that the people who live across that bridge and need access, I don't think that they would also want their municipality to spend that kind of money to get across that area. It is too bad, in one sense, the report's clear again, about having two entities that are involved. If you go there, you can see the trail access and the local snowmobile trail B that was talked about is also down and through there. So if it was the one, it does look like a glorified laneway, if you could put it that way. So that option is off the table because there are two, but I just hope we don't have to enter into, as Councillor Greenfield has said, $1.8 million on this particular bridge. So look forward in the future, and we have to start somewhere. So I'm prepared to get the engineering report to find out what we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Bell, for your comments. And my thoughts are similar. We're a bit between a rock and a hard place on this one. Our options are few. This bridge has to be replaced, and this council has agreed that we want to keep all bridges open. And I do hope that we can find a more affordable alternative. We've talked about those many times before, wooden bridges and bridges in boxes and Bailey bridges and all kinds of different things. And I am hopeful this could be an opportunity for us to try out something of that nature, as we did with the recycled pavement, and found out that that worked very well for us. And perhaps this is, as I say, an opportunity to experiment a little, if I may say, to see if we can find a crossing for this particular section. I do wonder if the landowners have been consulted at all. As Councillor Bell mentioned, I'm sure they wouldn't want us to spend $1.7 or $8 million down in there either. And if the only other alternative is for us to look at that land, and I don't think that's anything we are probably prepared to do, or would the landowners be interested in that conversation? So I do just wonder if they've been aware of this report, if they know that this bridge is being considered, or just at what point in the engineering might they have an opportunity to add comment to this process.
That's for you, Jessica.
I don't know.
Who wants to take it?
Through you, Madam Chair. We have been talking about this as well. So I haven't talked to the resident. I guess that's what I can safely say. As part of our process so far hasn't been to have that conversation with them. We are going off the OSIM and just the time frame in which things need to happen. But that's not to say that obviously they would know through the design process. We would be informing them and talking to them through that process as part of the design and the alternatives for what will be proposed there. Is that a fair, Rob, thing to say? Yeah.
Yeah, through your worship, that's normally they would be consulting through the design. We'd have a public information center with any other engineering project. Now, there's the other opportunity that we've been talking about is is there other opportunities other than replacing this current bridge, and whether that discussion should happen, and that should probably happen before we, because the engineer's focus, my understanding, is this structure and how you deal with that structure. If there's any other options that we're unaware of, that consultation would need to be conducted outside of this process.
And would that require an EA, an environmental assessment, for those to look at other alternatives of bridge construction?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the EA consideration would really be if we were closing the structure. So we would then be cycling back to, are we keeping it open or are we closing it? And then my other concern with the introduction of an EA is, are we okay with the outcome? So if the EA were to come back saying, we're going to close, like this should be closed, which has potentially been mentioned in the past, are we okay with that as an answer? So I think really the engagement of the EA would be, are we going to close the structure? We need to find alternative access for this property if that's the case, and then we would investigate that. But at this point, awarding the design, we're looking at alternatives for providing access because we have that obligation to do that at this point. So I think it's either taking a step forward or taking a step backward in a way.
And Councillor Vicker, and then.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a couple of questions. So obviously there isn't a car count on it. I was to the bridge there last week once I seen the report, and did take a venture over to it, and phoned a friend that lives up there, and he kind of gave me a bit of the background story of the gentleman that lives there. And I would dare say there would be 0 cars would go across that bridge some days if the gentleman never left his property, which is somewhat concerning. So another, again, to spend 1.8, 1.6, whatever the number is, like it seems like, this is a lot of money, for a laneway bridge. So does the snowplow plow across that bridge? Or does the owner, does he plow it himself?
Through you, Madam Chair, we do service, like it is technically a road, right? So we do service. At what point is it cut off? I'm not 100% sure, but we do have to provide them access to their property because it is a municipal right of way.
Okay, so and like you either, like once you make the right, you're on the bridge. So either once he makes the turn, there's no he doesn't go across, or he or she does not go across the bridge. They must, I guess. So I guess my thoughts on this, and it's concerning that staff hasn't talked to the gentleman that owns the property. And I would encourage you to do that. Would it be a difference? Would it make a difference if this was a privately owned laneway? So if we gave up our rights, sell the road allowance, give the road allowance, whatever it is, but before that, made a proper bridge for this gentleman to keep his access. Would a proposal like that be possible? And then it maybe wouldn't have to be the Taj Mahal bridge that we're getting ourselves somewhat wedged into, it seems like, by going down this process and even spending the $180,000 on the engineering report. So like, is there a way that we could set up an agreement, make it very functionable, very safe? Because if you look at the bridge, I don't think it is safe. And someday, the one, I think it's the west embutment, will probably end up in the creek. And we certainly don't want that. We don't want to make our problem a private citizen's problem. But I'm wondering if we make an agreement that we go about talking to the gentleman and creating a deal that then would have an acceptable solution that would come out to be less dollars than what we're into now. So I would appreciate a comment. I don't know whether there's a comment to be made, so.
You first. Can I go first? So these are all things that we've discussed. Obviously, staff have been following along the direction of council to, this is a municipal bridge and to keep all bridges open. So we've been following along that process. It's been in front of council a few times for providing additional direction on this particular bridge. And that hasn't been provided. So that's the rationale for us. Our internal discussion is maybe we should have those discussions before council awards it, see if there's another option out there, and what, if that's what council wants to do, then maybe there's the opportunity to defer this and give us not a lot of time, but a little discussions to see if there's opportunities before you award it. So the possibility of a deferral, and I think we may have already have a resolution in that regard, if that's the direction council wants to go, and have us take a look in that regard.
So if I could, I would certainly would like to make that motion that we defer the decision on this and not spend any more money until we have a clearer picture. And I know it's a little bit of a back and forth between council and staff about us requesting all bridges to stay open. But we really need to work hard on trying to accomplish the best outcome in the best amount of bridges that we possibly can. So if I could add something else to this, Matt, I still don't feel like I've got a good knowledge of what's the next bridge. So, if this was the last bridge in the municipality that had to be fixed and there was no more bridges, the rest of them were all going to be fine and, good for the next 25 years, maybe my idea would be different on this one. But I know this isn't the last one. And this is what causes us problems. We know there's more bridges to come, and to spend those kind of dollars on this one doesn't make good common sense, I guess is my concern. So if I could add to the motion that I think we also need a more of a fulsome discussion on all the bridges left to be fixed in the next 5 to 10, from year 1 to year 10 out.
Matt, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to step back one question of Councillor Vickers' first to your comment about selling the bridge and road to the landowner. Anything's possible. Closing a municipal road is more complicated than opening a municipal road. So we may have to go through environmental assessment to be able to do that even, which I know sounds a little crazy, but is the case even for a stub like this. My instinct is that we would still have to get somebody to engineer a bridge, and it would still cost the same amount of money to replace the bridge, and then we'd be asking somebody to take on an asset that then they have the liability for. Maybe they'd be interested, maybe they wouldn't, but it's certainly something that could be explored if that was what council wanted. In terms of sort of what's happening with bridges, I don't actually think you need to add it to a motion at this stage, Councillor Vickers, because the asset management plan will be with council within the month. And the asset management plan is going to talk about all of our roads, water infrastructure, and how we should go about replacing that. So I think you'll have a much better picture after that comes forward, likely in the second meeting in June. And that will sort of, we've been saying for a little while, more on the road side than the bridges side, but we've been saying for a while that we're sort of picking at things until we've got the asset management plan, which will then almost sort of schedule out the work. I think it is pretty safe to say, and this won't be a surprise to anybody around the table or listening, we need to do more work on bridges than we can probably afford.
Yep. So I would withdraw my last statement about what you about your reference to the asset management plans. So, but
But you.
I would want to keep the motion
To
defer until we know more about, more options that we might have outside of just replacing it or closing it. So I'd be interested to hear maybe that's the mayor's job.
So I have some words for that.
Okay.
And the motion will be that the motion be replaced with, quote, that a decision on the award of RFP INF TS 2022-03 provision of engineering services for structure 002 replacement be deferred until such time as staff bring forward additional information on alternate options for council's consideration.
So those are a lot more words than I would have had. But if I could add one more thing, I would really like staff to go and talk to the landowner. And I guess, maybe we have to talk to the Snowmobile Club and the Tom Thompson Trail.
Pardon? If we need a seconder for this motion, and once we have a seconder for this motion, there can be no further discussion on this. So before I have asked for a seconder,
I'll
there's
second.
other comments. And I had Councillor Kentner first. And then-
My
Councillor-
questions really are at the heart of what Paul was getting at, and I think that I'm just going to support his motion.
You're okay? All right. And Councillor Bartley?
So may I ask a few questions about this
Yes,
dilemma?
we don't have a seconder yet, so you can fire away
Okay,
now.
thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So I don't understand why you would want to talk to the landowner unless he's a bridge engineer. So if you talk to him and he says, oh, you don't replace my bridge, you don't have to, that can't happen. Do we not have a responsibility to replace that bridge because there's a landowner on the other side?
Yeah.
So talking to him and he says, oh, don't spend that money. That's not going to change that. The bridge isn't going to go away. Something has to be done with it. Nobody's mentioned culverts. Can we do a culvert on that river? That's a culvert on the same river 2 kilometers away. I just don't understand talking to the landowner. What's that going to do?
Communication is always important, though. I
Oh,
think
for
that
sure.
was where
But
you
so
were
if he
going with
says,
that.
so if the landowner says, no, don't spend that much money, you just don't?
No, we'd have to anyway.
Right.
Deputy Mayor, did you want to speak before we call a seconder for the motion?
Yeah, just on the comment, if I may, your worship, from Councillor Bartley, and I know I mentioned that as well, and my thinking was, as an alternative, there could be a potential for us as a municipality to look at purchasing the land. Now, we don't know the value of the land or, if we want to do that or not, but I just thought that might be a conversation to have rather than going ahead and spending 1.7 or $8 million. And then, the gentleman might have said, I'd rather have you not done that and I would have sold you my property. I just thought that was a conversation that perhaps could happen, but in that regard, I do support the deferral until staff have an opportunity to look at other potential options that we're not aware of today, because I think honestly, we're in this position because of what happened with bridges 21 and 22. They got closed. We have never been happy about that. We're still working on trying to get those bridges reopened. And so this council said we have to keep all bridges open so that we didn't end up in a situation like that one again. So I think that's why we are where we are here today.
Okay. Jessica, sorry. Please go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, sorry. I feel like we're a team in decisions and I want to make sure that everyone has the right information. I understand that structures are expensive. Sometimes I think it's overwhelming to us as well that these structures are costing what they are. But I just want everyone to understand that those prices won't change. So and if anything this year, they're probably more expensive given the costs of everything. So I just want to be transparent that I feel like we always say all the time, they're so expensive, but truthfully, that's the cost of replacing the structure. And in this particular instance, we did do a comparison, which I think we talked about at budget time, about buying the property versus what the cost of construction was. And at the time, which is not discluding assessment values and how things have changed, was just short of $1 million was our estimate to purchase the property versus the construction costs, which I'm definitely not a real estate expert, but I feel like things are different now than they were then, but the same goes for construction costs. So I just want to make sure that I just don't want people to think that the alternatives could really bring the cost drastically down. Like, we do need to provide the service. And I think we're always looking for options to do things more cost effective for the residents. But unfortunately, sometimes the costs are just what they are.
I think that's understood, but if the alternatives would consider other types of construction, for example, culverts, then it would be worthwhile, I think, moving ahead in that direction. Okay, Councillor Bell, you had a
Just one quick one, Madam Mayor. You mentioned it again just by using the word culvert. So as I was out there, I also thought of a deck over. So when you look at the little bridge and we keep talking about the removal, that would be up to an engineer to say whether it needed to be removed. But even with that structure that's in there to support the weight, which our report says it was reduced to 8 tons a few months ago or years ago. Again, another option for an engineer to come up with for some money is what would it be if we're a steel deck over to getting from one side to the other. So actually on Councillor Vickers' thing about, deferral, I can support that for options. Yeah.
And
So I should clarify, Madam Mayor, the options wouldn't be about types of bridges. The options will be buying the land or a different route or a road around the back of a property or something. To get different options on types of bridge, you have to award this design contract because we don't have an engineer on staff otherwise.
So through you, Madam Chair, it's great suggestions, but that was the intent of the design, was to look at bridge alternative solutions. So that's what we're hoping to achieve through the tender, was whether we do a deck over, whether the culvert's an option. We don't know that right now, but they're great suggestions. And that's kind of what we're hoping to achieve with that report.
And we don't need an EA for that. That's the engineering report that is now. Okay. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you again, Your Worship. I'll try to make this the last one through you to Jessica. There was a potential option mentioned in the report, and that was concerning 28th Avenue, an extension of 28th Avenue. Now, it was likely over 20 years ago. I did some repair work at the Hatton Cemetery, and we brought a cement truck in on whatever road there was there. Now, I'm just trying to figure the geography, but Hatton Cemetery is not terribly far south of this property. So when we're talking about options, maybe we should at least take a look at, just even a brief inquiry about, hey, is there any potential there?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, that's a great solution. Good to know that you drove a cement truck there. We had actually, through the alternatives as well, looked at kind of what you're saying. So it's an extension essentially of 28th Avenue, kind of at Side Road 24. We figure the access would be about 1,500 meters-ish. And at the time when we had done that, we thought the cost of construction would be, again, around the 900,000 to $1 million mark. And that would also potentially involve Owen Sound because of the location and it being a boundary road. So yes, it is something that we had looked at and could potentially further look at. But again, I think the comparison was between the cost of that construction, but then that doesn't include the maintenance part. That was the piece that was missing, was then the right of way is our responsibility for maintenance, which is fine. It's just something to also keep in the back of our minds, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to look for a second of Councillor Bartley? And now you want, okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in this report, the $58,000 was for them to come up with a plan, and the 172 was for them to monitor the building of a bridge? Or were both figures just for them to come up with a plan?
Through you, Madam Chair. So both were to develop or design the structure. And part of that carries over into our next year with making sure they follow through with the design. So contract administration, et cetera, in the following year. So both of them mushed together are design and administering the project the following year.
Right. So
But
when,
it's not two separate amounts. The total is the 172. Just 50 something of that will be paid next year for the contract administration.
okay. So if it was awarded for a bridge and it was $1.7 million, they don't tack on another fee to administer building that bridge. It's already paid.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kentner.
Yeah, thank you.
Last
And
question. Go ahead.
through you, Your Worship, I had a couple of questions, but I'm just going to go back to the fundamental question that I did have before this motion came forward. And that is, as I read the report, it said that all options to avoid replacing the bridge, had been run into the ground. But is that true or not? Have we run all the options, alternative possibilities, not alternative bridges, but alternative options because I think that likely we have exhausted them, but I would like to hear that perhaps from our CAO.
Through your worship, as through you to Councillor Kenner, as Jessica has indicated, we did look at what we believe to be all the options, and really the cost of those additional options were going to be the same as replacing the bridge. So I think that was the rationale for it proceeding. I think having a discussion with the owner, and maybe he knows something that we don't know. And there's another option. I look and it looks like on an air photo that he may drive through the water course at the south end of his property to get from field to field. And maybe there's an option there that something could be put there and we could speak to him about that. But it's more talking to him and see if he's aware of something that we're not.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion proposed by Councillor Vickers, and perhaps you could read it again for us, Matt.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Would you read the
Yes,
proposed motion
So
amendment?
Councillor Vickers'
Vickers.
proposed amendment was, sorry, I'll just sort of scroll to the right place on my screen. That a decision on the award of RFP number, etc., be deferred until such time as staff bring forward additional information on alternate options for council's consideration.
Okay, so that is moved by Councillor Vickers. I need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Greenfield, thank you. And that ends the discussion on this. All in favor of this deferment? Any against? That is carried. Okay, thank you. Good discussion, everyone. Moving on to community services, COM 2022-16. Restricted acts after nomination day. Moving to seconder, please to put that on the table. Councillor Greenfield, Deputy Mayor, thank you. And this is a recommendation that the Committee of the Whole receive report COM 2022-16. Restricted acts after nomination day for information purposes. Any comments, questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to financial services, FIN 2022-08 as the reserve and reserve fund analysis number 3. This is the third report that we've been expecting and are now receiving. I'm moving a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Kentner and Deputy Mayor, thank you. Again, this is for information purposes. Are there any questions or comments from council? Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And a question for Valerie, if I may. There's a discussion about doing some shuffling amongst the reserves. And I think I probably know the answer, but I'll ask you anyway. If we do that, And if some of the reserves are potentially, eliminated or amalgamated, is there any potential at all to move any reserve funds to reserves? Just to potentially allow council a little more access to some of the funds, should we so desire?
Through you,
Thank you,
Madam Mayor,
Ms.
to
Price.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney. I think so. I think it would be fine, but I know we're going to have a brief meeting next week to discuss that. So at that time, if we do anything, we'll bring another report to tell you what we're doing. Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to Valerie. These are all 2020 figures. Should we not have 2021 year-end figures?
Through you.
Go ahead.
Yes, next council meeting, you'll get a surplus deficit report as well as the 2 following reserve reports that you usually get. We're just finishing up this week.
Thank you.
Councilor Vickers.
Through you, your worship. So we have cemetery at 41,000 and cemetery lot improvement at 109,000. So I'm struggling to understand, and even reading the report, I'm really struggling to understand what the difference between those 2 reserve funds are.
I'll take this one, Madam Mayor, as these were a couple of the ones that I looked at. Me too. This is a really good example of a couple of the things that, as we've been digging through them, there's a few sort of bits that we're not totally sure about. Some of it is because some were created a long time ago and some were created more recently. And I think we just need to do sort of a bit more understanding of what it is. Like when we talk about lot improvement, we could say, okay, that's dedicated to actually the laying out of more plots. Whereas the other cemetery one is for things at the cemetery, but that feels like a bit of a tenuous distinction to me. So that may well be one of the ones that we suggest we combine together with some guidance on it in the next report.
And if I may go a little further on the cemetery, and there's no real perpetual fund to fund maintenance, like grass cutting.
So
the
there
cemetery,
is a perpetual fund. Every sale comes with a care and maintenance fee, and that goes into the perpetual accounts. That's completely separate from the reserves. We hold it completely separately. We're not allowed to use the capital of that at all. We can only use the interest from it. The interest goes nowhere near covering the costs of running a cemetery, and it doesn't affect any cemetery anywhere. So there is, I actually don't know the total, but there is quite a lot of money set in that account, but it will sit there forever, to be honest.
So does the interest come back into the budget?
Yes.
It does.
Okay. Anything further? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving this report for information purposes, and that is carried. Moving on to infrastructure services, INF 2022-03, the vehicle leasing program update, again, received for information purposes. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Put that on the table. Councillor Kentner and Councillor Vickers. Again, questions for staff from council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report speaks to moving towards electric vehicles, which is great. That's definitely what we want to see. But that, of course, will require charging stations. So I'm wondering if Enterprise will participate in the funding of these charging stations.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are currently working with them on, I want to say, an electrification strategy. I have had the pleasure of working with, or having some great communications with the county just on they're doing something very similar. So we have had a few preliminary conversations to date with Enterprise, who are going to provide us with additional information this summer on what electrification would look like and what our options are and what those options prices are as well. So personally, as part of the budget process this year, I think we will have, I know we will have all that information available in order to make preliminary suggestions, i.e. we probably should be upgrading electrical services at some of our locations in the coming years, as opposed to waiting to do electrical upgrades. Purchasing of charging stations and vehicles all in 1 year is not really ideal. So we are looking at making it more of a strategy and spreading out costs and opportunities over the next few years. Ideally looking for electrification of some of our fleet in our first rotation. So in about a 2-year time frame. Sorry, that might have been a longer answer than you were hoping for.
Still a good answer.
I just wanted to yes, Jessica. Thank you.
I know.
I'd like to hear that. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and to Jessica. Since our municipality has entered into the enterprise way of purchasing equipment, I need some clarity on one aspect of that service. Is it true that our mechanics do not work on the enterprise vehicles because our service bay is not an authorized enterprise service depot? Is that comment correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, part of the agreement with Enterprise is to send it to their approved shop.
Yes.
Which is a benefit because it is a local establishment as well.
Yes.
We do book servicing for those vehicles with that provider.
Yep.
And therefore our mechanics are not working on that part of our fleet. Is it necessarily because we're not a provider, if you will? Truthfully, I don't think we've really thought of it that way. It's more they're going to the authorized dealer in a local environment, and it's just not coming into our base then.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. So have we, management team, ever looked at, I know our mechanics are Class A mechanics. What could we enter in with Enterprise to getting our service bays an authorized location so that we can perform some of the work that has been brought to my attention that we have been outletting? And again, I also support other small businesses. They all need a piece of the pie. Okay, I get that big time, but I'm just wondering whether we can look into our bay being a certified bay. Can we do that, or do I need to do something different than just asking?
No, not at all. Through you, Madam Chair, that's a great question. And we can definitely find out for sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further questions? Comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving this for information purposes, and that is carried. And now we're on to updates from members appointed to County Council and committees. And that puts you on deck, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Deputy Warden Paul McQueen called the meeting to order last Thursday morning in the absence of Warden Hicks, who was stepped back to run as our Liberal candidate for Grey Bruce. The consent agenda included the minutes of our recent Economic Development Advisory Committee, and I did speak to that at our last meeting, and the Tourism Advisory Committee, which speaks to the shift to investing in infrastructure rather than promotion, since visitation numbers to Grey are very strong through the pandemic. Grey County ambassadors will be reintroduced. Watch for them in and around Mayford. There was considerable discussion on the process introduced by County Solicitor Michael Letourneau related to the ability for the county to expropriate land should this ever be necessary. And I found this really interesting, so I'm just going to read through the steps for this process. So obtaining ownership of land by expropriation follows these basic steps. Land is identified for expropriation. This may also include rights that are less than full ownership, such as easements or time-limited rights that may be used only to facilitate construction. A formal notice is issued to the landowner and the public to apply to start the expropriation process. Within 30 days, the notice of being issued, the landowner or other interested parties may request a hearing of necessity, whereas the hearing officer from the Ontario Land Tribunal reviews the proposed expropriation and issues a non-binding report. The relevant approval authority considers the expropriation application, and if a hearing was conducted, a report would follow from the hearing officer. The approval authority may approve the expropriation application as it was submitted, or reject it. If approved, a survey of the expropriated land called an expropriation plan must be registered on title to the property within 3 months of approval. And within 3 months of registration of the expropriation plan, an offer of compensation must be made to the owner. If the owner does not accept the compensation offered, the amount may be settled via the Ontario Land Tribunal through negotiation and then arbitration if necessary. So this has not yet happened, but I thought it was important information for our own municipality to be aware of as well. The county's project planning engineer, Trevor Ireton, requested approval for $93,303 to purchase a single-sourced Iris Go R&D data collection system, which is really neat. It consists of GoPro-type cameras that will be placed in a county patrol truck, and this service will allow ongoing asset management to be collected. This data will assist staff in prioritizing road and signage works. The county is responsible for 8,500 road signs and 1,738 kilometers of roads. Completing inspections in this manner will save manpower, will help the county meet asset management requirements of the province, and will result in more timely repairs. So the question that came to County Council was, could any of this data be shared with municipalities, or is there any potential for partnerships? And I think that there could be, should any of us as lower tiers be interested in that, although it would require more cameras and more trucks and potentially county trucks traveling on municipal roads and so on. But there's opportunity, I think, for conversation there. And last Thursday was County Clerk Heather Morrison's very last meeting with County Council. Heather said her goodbyes and expressed many notes of appreciation. After 32 years on the job, Heather will very sorely be missed. But we do congratulate Tara Warder as a successful candidate to replace Heather. And certainly we all wish Heather a very healthy and happy retirement. And that was it for me, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Parks Advisory Committee is going to take that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, it was a meeting held, Mr. Voigt kind of led the charge on that and told the Parks Committee all about the official plan. It was quite interesting. And then we finished up with Mr. Willis telling the Parks Committee about the grass cutting being brought back in-house. So there was really not much other than the official plan of the grass cutting talked about this month at the Parks Committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the Meaford Business Improvement Area, the BIA, and that would be you, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it does seem that our very own Mr. Voigt's been quite busy, to say the least, on this official plan, as he also made a presentation at the BIA, giving them another portion of the overview. I think, Mr. Voigt, if I got this right, I think that the BIA got the clear that this is a framework for how this municipality is looking at all aspects. And as when you were there, they had questions about the Market Square. And as they were trying to get into the very micromanaging of a situation with that terminology, when I had opportunity to kind of put my words to the BIA, I said, keep up the good work on the Market Square and this winter activity, because the official plan can definitely accept that, and it will evolve on its own to be its own entity. And we can make the official plan definitely be dynamic enough to take that into consideration, if I've got that correct. He's nodding, so that's good. Also, something that everyone will see is the BIA is spending some money on 2 park benches, and they are fairly expensive, and they're getting 2 of them. And their thought was that they need to have a couple of other spots for people who are going through, walking by, just a little spot to sit down, take a breather. And they decided that their fairly classy looking park benches will be coming in the future. They've approved it. So that's that.
Okay. And we also have, in conjunction with the BIA, a recommendation coming forward that the BIA board requested the council award the $2,500 in funding to the Christmas on the Market Square on the Bay event in lieu of the 2022 community bursary funds. Did you wish to speak to that, and we need a mover and a seconder to put that on the table for discussion?
Well, Mr. Smith can probably give us some good guidance as the procedural situation, but I would expect that we probably should, as that's what they desire to do with it.
Okay.
And
Will you move that
Sure.
then? All right. Could I have a seconder for that recommendation coming forward? Councillor Vickers. And is there any discussion on that? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Very good. Thank you. Is there anything else that anyone from council wishes to bring forward this time? Okay, so I need a motion to move out of committee of the whole, please. Councillor Bartley. Deputy Mayor, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. So we're moving on to
Excuse me,
councillor
Your Worship.
motions. I'm sorry,
Would we be able to have a short break?
a short break?
Yeah,
Absolutely. We can.
if you don't mind.
We've been in, yes, please. 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, back and reassume here with councillor motions. And the first one is, are there any notices of motion to come before council? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, your worship. I will be asking for a notice of motion to ask staff to prepare a report asking for a 1% tax increase in the municipal rate to be dedicated annually to affordable/attainable housing projects, preferably rental projects, and to suggest initiatives to raise this funding by examining areas of potential municipal savings, including, but not limited to, a reduction in our 1, 1, and 0.5 yearly infrastructure increase. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that moves us on to motions for decision. The first one is from Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry.
Oh, I apologize, your worship. I had a
You
notice
have
of
another
motion.
notice. My error. Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, your worship. And just as mentioned earlier, after Marg Scheben-Edey's presentation, a notice of motion to request staff to begin the preparation of a terms of reference to have a framework in place should the new council like to go forward with a committee to look at affordable housing as was suggested by Marg. Thank you.
Sorry about that. We were just talking about it. Okay, any other notices of motion coming forward? Seeing none, we'll move on to the ones that we have before us today. And the first one is back to you, Deputy Mayor, with regard to short-term accommodation rentals.
Thank you very much, your worship. I just wanted to begin by saying that I certainly support tourism. We need visitors in our community. We want them to come and explore Meaford. We want them to shop in our stores and to support our restaurants and come to Meaford Hall and so on. But I do think we've reached a time, and we've talked about short-term accommodations several times at this council table, but we now have considerably more than we did when we last talked about it. We believe we've over 200, and just to kind of get ahead of things, I thought we should have a look at, whether or not we want any restrictions or regulating authorities or anything placed upon them. I thought it might be helpful for fire and bylaw to have a listing of where the locations are and to gain an understanding, again, as was suggested by Marg, of the number of housing units that potentially are taken out of the market because of short-term rentals. And do we have or need a more effective avenue for dealing with complaints? We know we have some party houses, shall I call them, as Airbnbs, and just do we need to address that? So just looking for your support, if I may ask you to do that, to join me with this motion and asking staff to prepare that report in conjunction with the official plan process. Thank you.
So I'm assuming you will move that motion.
I certainly will.
Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Councillor Kentner, thank you. All right, any comments, questions for the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Vickers.
So if I may, through you, your worship, so it's a fairly narrow scope. So you just want to know how many and how many complaints? Is that what I'm reading in the notice of motion?
Within the notice of motion, those points are certainly mentioned, but I believe within the official plan process, there will be opportunity to consider comments made by our residents who perhaps are living in proximity to Airbnbs and so on, and to get a broader understanding of if there are issues that we need to be concerned about at this point in time, and if there are, how we should address them. And I believe having that discussion may be a support to our bylaw, who potentially will most often have to deal with these types of complaints.
So to further that, is this a spot to include this in our official plan? Like, is this the right place for it, I guess, is the question?
I believe so, and perhaps Director Voigt would like to speak to that.
Through your worship, I believe the way the motion has been worded, it's broad enough to address the broader implications of land use and all things sort of housing stock, if I can use that terminology. And again, because we're dealing with the official plan being a policy document, it won't be explicit to dealing with the numbers of Airbnbs and things of that nature. Will be about their influence or effect on housing stock and how we manage that. And so there's a bunch of things there that I think we can easily address. Also, I believe, as the motion stated, there was a request perhaps for some report back, which would be kind of the data piece of it, which then allows us to look at how it might influence current service operations and those relating to municipal enforcement, right? So there is a bit of an interplay between the two, but I think we can address that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything further? Then I will call a question. All in favor of this motion going forward? And that is carried. The second motion we have before us is from Councillor Kentner with regard to renewable energy projects. And I'm assuming that you will move this, will you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And I'll ask for a seconder before I have you speak for it. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Greenfield? Okay, over to you then, Councillor Kentner, to speak to this.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think in fairness to the audience and the complexity of the issue, I guess I'm going to read the motion. It's just whereas the existing official plan for the municipality of Meaford does not contain policies related to the siting and development of wind turbines due to provincial restrictions that were in force at the time of adoption. And whereas the provincial government removed those restrictions in 2020, allowing municipalities to adopt policies related to the location of wind turbines, whereas council recognizes the potential for innovative green energy production projects to be proposed in the future in the municipality of Meaford, and whereas council believes that the official plan review process should consider policies regarding the location and development of wind turbines, solar farms, and other green energy projects. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford direct staff as part of the current official plan review to develop policies for addressing applications and approvals for potential renewable energy projects within the municipality, which create an effective framework for site selection, consideration of compatibility with both agriculture and tourism uses, and addressing environmental impacts on neighboring properties. And I just want to stress that this has got nothing to do with the pump storage project. Pump storage is about monetizing energy from green energy projects. And so I think there's every possibility that going forward, we may see some of these projects proposed in our municipality. So I think as we're updating the official plan, it's an opportunity that we can take advantage of to decide where we do and don't want such projects cited. And I had some valuable help from our planning and development head, Rob Voigt, and perhaps if he would be good enough to just maybe offer his comment on the importance of this motion in terms of giving us more planning ability going forward. Thank you.
Over to you, Rob.
Through your worship, again, it's interesting. I think all the last four motions that have been brought forward relating to the official plan, I think are all obviously timely because of what we're doing with that update. Anything that's dealing with land use potentially, or particularly those items that are likely of a larger scale, as we've been talking about here with this one in terms of green energy, this is solar farms, wind turbines, what have you. There's all kinds of things that fall into that. They tend to be land intensive and while having all kinds of positive benefits on a provincial, national, or global scale, can sometimes have quite drastic local neighborly impacts. I think we're all recognize that, particularly with things like wind farms. And so we want to make sure that we have the policies in place and the procedures in place that we can properly manage those as part of our land resource management. I mean, it's the only thing we have as a municipality is our land. And so we need to make sure that we are looking at how that works for the benefits of what it does for green energy, for jobs, for investment, but also so that we are avoiding or mitigating any negative impacts. So I think I welcome this kind of thought being put into the official plan so that we're ready for the coming decades, as this is likely to become more and more important in our area.
Thank you, Rob. Councilor Vickers.
So through your worship. So since 2020, the municipality has had the ability to say, we don't want a wind farm put in our municipality. Is that how I'm reading this? Because that's not how I thought the legislation really was.
Yeah, so the history, we did our 2005 official plan. We did have the ability to do it, but then it was 2009, 2010, where they removed that ability. They're allowing you to include policies to guide it. Those, as Councillor Kentner has advised, you can include policies to guide where you would and wouldn't like to see them, similar to some of the zoning provisions we had in place that had to be removed because of the legislation. So we do have that ability to include policies. I know that we've already passed a resolution that we're unwilling hosts for wind farms. However, typically with planning is you can't prohibit, you can only guide. And that's what we look at through the official plan review process.
Thank you for that. Any further questions, comments? I will call a question. All in favor of this motion going forward? And any against? Okay, that is carried. Moving on to the adoption of minutes, the first one being the council meeting of May the 2nd. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Bartley, Councillor Vickers, thank you. Are there any comments, questions on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of them being adopted, and that is carried. And the second is the council meeting of May the 9th. Move in a seconder, please, to put Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Bartley. Again, any comments or questions on these minutes? As distributed. All in favor receiving them, and that is carried. And the closed meetings of May the 9th. Move in a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you, and Councillor Greenfield. Knowing that we will have to go into closed if there's any discussion on these. Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor, and that is carried. And Council of May 16th, 2022. Move in a seconder, please. Councillor Kentner and Deputy Mayor, thank you. Any comments, questions on these minutes as presented? Seeing none, all in favor, accepting, and those are adopted. Okay, moving on to communications. There's quite a file here. Are there any of these that council would like to pull for further discussion? Okay, not seeing any. That moves us then on to the confirming bylaw, which is the recommendation, be it resolved that bylaw 2022-36 is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Meaford at its regular meetings held in the month of May 2022, and that they be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bell and Councillor Greenfield. Thank you. And all in favor of this motion. And that is carried. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of our agenda. And I declare this meeting adjourned.